All right, Shane, why don't you go rock into it, man? Let's do this
Oh.
thing.
Okay. Kia ora tātou, ko Shane Hasty tēnei. Good day, folks. I'm Shane. Yeah, as we've been putting into the chat, I am from a little town in New Zealand called Otaki, and it is a sunny, well, hopefully sunny day, 6 a.m. here. It is the middle of winter, and I'm going to talk to you about uh, the new class that Softedit has put together, but it's more about the topic here, the leading yourself, leading with agility, and that's where we're focused. So it is an IC Agile accredited class, and it is linked to the learning outcomes that IC Agile have published for leading with agility. I suppose the starting point is what's different about leading in an agile way or an agile environment? And it's really about coping with the the highly rapidly changing, volatile environments that we find ourselves in today. And the leadership practices of the 20th century don't apply anymore. We also need to think about the people that we lead and ourselves, the the differences in experience and background, the expectations on us as leaders in organizations, and the responsibility of leadership is not something that happens high up in the organizational structures. This comes all the way through, and the concept of leadership at every level. Any person in the organization can bring a leadership mindset and step into leadership. So, what are the organizational capabilities? What are the leadership capabilities? What are the behaviors that we bring to the table that increase agility in the organization? That ability to adapt and respond quickly. And from that, developing yourself. So there's quite a lot in this about mindfulness. The class, the experience in the class is going to be a very deep personal experience. We're holding up the mirror and exploring what it is that I need to do differently. So, developing myself, emotional intelligence is one of the key areas. Um, Conversations and storytelling. How do I support organizational transformation? And how do I lead? How do I bring others on these journeys? So, and it's really important. I want to re-emphasize that this is leadership at every level, and it's very, very much about how do I lead with integrity, with mindfulness within myself. The work that we do, this David Marquet quote or Michael Holland, the change in leadership, it's we're stepping into a space that is very, very different from what was required of leadership and of management in the previous eras. We are stepping into a space where we have to bring people on a journey with us, where the leader is not going to be the smartest person in the room, who's not going to have the answers, and we accept that we don't have the answers. So my job isn't to uh, spoon feed people and tell them exactly what to do. My job is to hold the space and enable them, these highly skilled professional problem solvers, these knowledge workers that make up the bulk of our workforce today, to leverage the skill and knowledge that they have, we have to be able to rapidly respond. We have to be comfortable that we're not that smartest person in the room. And this is for many traditional leaders, it's a hard space to step into, because this is about personal transformation first and foremost. But we look at we look a little bit at history. We go back to, with this one, cottage industry in the 1800s, and what has happened. We'll also touch on Frederick Laloux's work in terms of reinventing organizations and moving through the color schemes towards green and teal organizations today, and the types of leadership that are needed at there, and transformational leadership that is inspirational and helping, again, bring others on that journey with us. So how do I step up as a leader into that space of um, inspiring others? What is it that our organizations need? So we're going to spend some time talking about the nature of organizations today. What has actually shifted and changed? And these 14 principles of the future organization, they are radically different to many organizations. And yet for some, these are, of course, this is the way we work. The native, the digital native organizations, some of the newer parts of the economy. Well, people in those organizations look at this and go, yeah, duh. But for many of us, this is, again, quite a significant shift. And for those of us who've been leaders, managers, or grown up in more traditional organizations, understanding these shifts, understanding these principles, understanding how we need to interact in order to support these types of organizations is a significant shift. And again, we're going to be exploring this quite deeply. We're going to look at the adaptive leadership as one of the key models, and what are the capabilities, how do we support, and how do our organizations, and both our organizations and ourselves, how do we tackle this? And I do believe the recording and the slides will be available. Yes. We'll get into what are the traits? What are some of the key things that these adaptive leaders need to be able to do? How do they show up? How do they step up in their environment today? And looking at competencies and behaviors, and how, again, holding the mirror, how do I step into these behaviors? So I do want to re-emphasize, and for me, this is part of the greatness of this class, is as the facilitator, I'm holding the space, I'm leading the conversations or guiding the conversations, but the participants, the people in the class, are the ones who truly are delving into this and we will touch on AI, not so much in this presentation, but in the class. Yes, we do talk about the the remote and AI are huge trends, and the leadership in that remote environment is one of the key things that is driving this. Another important element is this concept of leadership at every level. We have influence, and how do we bring that influence to the table? How do we bring people on a journey with us? And a lot of the elements of the class are going to be in having those powerful conversations. And how do I show up in a way that brings people on the journey with me? We will look at the leader's role in team development, and we look at not just this, of course, is the Tuckman model of team formation. We also look at Drexler Sebbert and different modes, models, views, because there's no single right model. It really is how do we guide through that? And a lot of conversations, a lot of references and content and exploration about understanding the people I work with and elements of culture. What are the different cultural elements? We'll introduce the Western culture and talk culture assessments and talk about how do we help our organization as leaders? How do we help guide, shift, bring about the understanding of culture and guidance in terms of culture shift? Because it totally. Do we do teaching as well as discussing? Oh, yes. We have a stance of training from the back of the room style teaching in the classroom. But let's talk about some of the key topics here. Well, we've covered on a lot of them. We've all heard of fixed and growth mindset. This has been around for a while. It's very much about the great work of Carol Dweck has brought this to the fore of understanding that we really need to show up with an open mind. But there's a step forward, a step beyond that we're starting to see, and this is the benefit mindset. How do I not just show up happy to learn and grow? How do I show up with an open heart? What do I need to do to and if we think about what society needs today, what our organizations need today, it's so much more than just me. It's very much about not even my organization. It's how does my organization make a change in the environment that we're a part of, whether we're talking having an impact on the social elements of society, tackling the inequalities that we see all around us, whether it's being responsive to climate change. How do I show up? And that this concept of a benefit mindset is a key thing that we should be bringing to the table in the work that we do today. And it starts with one, knowing myself. And here a tool like the Johari window can be really useful. How do I, when I reflect, when I sit down and I ask myself, what do, how well do I know myself? What's known to me? What is known to others, but not, sorry, known to me, not known to others? What's my blind spots? What's known to others, but I don't see it? And then over on the bottom right, what are the things that are just I don't know and others don't know? And we start when you this is a self-awareness tool. And a mindfulness tool where we hold up the mirror to ourselves, and then we have conversations with people that we trust to explore, what are my blind spots? Can I have the courage to ask the people around me, what am I, both, where do I make an influence, a difference? Where do I impact you that I don't realize? And what way is this happening? And then I also consciously think about what are the things that I'm keeping close that I could share and bring. And being aware of this, so my self-awareness is a big step into where do I want to go? How do I want to show up in the world? And then, and the gesture I'm using of opening that window. Think of it as a window we can open. And the mindfulness, that's almost become a hackneyed phrase, isn't it? But there are some key practices, things that we can step into. Love the work of being mindful. So deliberately choose, put time aside, whether it's 5 minutes a day to start with, to just stop and ask yourself, who am I? Where am I? Bring in some sort of a meditative practice. And this isn't sitting going on. It's quietly, it could be a walk on the beach. It could be a quiet time in the garden. It could be just sitting at your desk and asking yourself, where am I at today? Where do I want to be? What's the step? And know that you don't know, and it's okay. That I might not have the answer yet. The coaching stance tells me that everybody has the answer within themselves. But that little bit of reflection can help find the answer. Connect to your pain. What are the things that when I do this or I start to step into it is uncomfortable? And then asking myself what's happening. And building the empathy, connect to the pain of others, even when it is difficult. Now, trust, build that connection to others, depend on others. And keep making it simpler. What's most important right now? What's the one small thing? Now, initially, stepping into a space of mindfulness is can be very uncomfortable. But just 5 minutes to stop and ask, who am I? Where am I? Where am I at? Where am I going? And build the habit. And start to think about, what's my purpose? Where am I? The concept of ikigai. Can you find that center? What is it that you love? What is it you're good at? What can you be paid for? It helps. And what does the world need? And stepping into a space where all four of those are met is a space of deep, deep satisfaction, alignment of yourself with purpose. This does require taking time to have that mindfulness practice, to stop and think. For so many of us, life is so busy. We don't take the time to pause. And in this one, I talk to myself so much because I find I run, and every now and again I go, oh, but I haven't stopped and thought, wait a minute, how, what, where to? And it's vitally, vitally important to take that time to stop and reflect. And to understand that my perspective is not everyone else's perspective, that we all bring our mental models, our view of the world, the perspective. And knowing my own biases, backgrounds, perspectives, context that I bring, and stepping with empathy into what's the context and perspective that somebody else brings. And building the empathy. So leadership today is about empathy. And empathy is one of the key elements of emotional intelligence. And there's been a lot of work on emotional intelligence. It's far from a new topic, but it's such a really vital thing for us to step into a space of awareness. On the left-hand side of the model, we have the self-awareness, the self-confidence, the emotional self-awareness, and the accurate self-assessment. So what's happening to me, and being able to again, hold that mirror up and stepping into self-management. Now that I know what's happening to me, how do I choose to respond? And then on the right, as I manage and deal with myself, I can start to manage more effectively with other people, and the social awareness and relationship management aspects of emotional intelligence are incredibly important. In fact, in the life skills there's a lot of evidence, and if you go to Daniel Goleman's work and the research he's done on that, they're showing distinct correlation between building these competencies in emotional intelligence and success in life and success in work, far, far more so than the correlation between cognitive intelligence and success in life and work. And the other great thing about the emotional intelligence model is these are competencies you can build. They're hard competencies to build. They take practice. They take deliberately pausing in an interaction and saying, before I give a knee-jerk response, let me pause for a moment and think, what is happening in that person, whether it's that is triggering or causing their response, and what is happening in me that is causing my reaction, particularly when the response and reactions are stepping into a negative space, taking a moment. And this is a hard practice to get into, but it's incredibly powerful to just stop and pause. What's happening here? How can I show up with empathy, step into that other person's viewpoint? Even if we disagree, how can I be empathic and then change the nature of the conversation, change the nature of the interaction? And working on your emotional intelligence, recognizing, and it does come down to the awareness in the first place, and then the management. These are for some of us hard skills to build. I certainly have over the years have struggled in that space. We also need to take a systems view. If we think of our organization, because if we're talking about leadership in the organization, we need to understand that the organization is a system. And when we think about systems, there are interactions, there are components, there are relationships between those components, and what happens, and what we do, how we do it, and who does it are elements that we need to look at. And all of those elements will come together in this view of the organization as a system. And when we start to view the organization as a system, we can then start to manage the system through influencing the different components and guide the system to better outcomes, whether that is reduced time to market, increased profitability, all of the things that we want, increased customer engagement, increased employee engagement. These things happen through systemic change. How do we can't change a single thing. We can't influence a single part and expect that change. So we need to look at all of those elements and how they're interwoven and linked together. And drawing upon models like human systems dynamics, understanding, again, this is the self-awareness and awareness of what's going on in the organization. So what we see at the top, the top of the iceberg, is the observable behaviors. We need to dig deep. What are the patterns? What are we seeing that is regularly repeating? Because those trends will tell us something. Then we look at, is the org design, the structural components triggering this? And then right at the bottom is, what is it about our thinking? And we change when we start to address our mental models. That viewpoint, that ingrained set of habits that we all have. And then we can start to shift. And these are small shifts, the 1% at a time. This is not about radical change. These are small, steady, constant shifts that we're making in ourselves, that we're influencing in the people around us. So
Hey,
the
Shane, can you
question,
give your thought about complex adaptive systems?
complex adaptive system. So a complex adaptive system is a system where we have to, that responds to what is happening in and around it. But it's very, very difficult to predict what it's going to do. Birds flocking is a good example. You can't define the rules in a rigid way. But if you follow the flow, the behavior emerges. So if we think within our organizations, every organization is a complex system. Complexity is the reality of today. Relationships are not simple. The pressures on the outside world, and that system is responding to those pressures that are coming, both within and without. Whether this is the needs of our people, the pressures in the marketplace, government change, regulation, so forth. There's a lot of things that are a lot of moving parts, and that makes for complexity. The system itself, the people and the organization are constantly responding to those and adapting, and they are changing. And we need to be able to respond and adapt quickly. So going back to the birds metaphor, this is one of the early analyses of complex adaptive systems. But if we think about the way that birds flocked, a group of scientists were trying to predict how flocks of birds would move, and they could not figure it out. Then they were simulating this in computer simulations, and they couldn't get it right because they were putting more and more rigid rules. They were trying to define exactly how it should happen. One day they shifted their thinking entirely and said, what if we reduce the rules? And they ended up with 3 simple rules that they put into a simulation. And the rules were: go in the same direction as those around us, stay within a certain distance, and stay no closer than a certain distance of those around us. And they put those rules into the simulation, and they saw the behaviors that they were then seeing in the wild. And this has become quite insightful in terms of our organizations. The more rigid we try and make the rules, the less responsive and adaptive we become. And yet when we lighten up the rules, we see intelligent behavior emerging. And in complex adaptive systems, intelligent behavior emerges. So this comes into agility in terms of things like cross-functional teams. Rather than trying to define a rigid bureaucratic set of rules about exactly how every business process should be defined, give a self-organizing group of people who have shared goals and a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve a set of guidelines and allow them to work out the best way to do things in the moment. And what we see in that, so this is a significant shift in thinking. This is part of that management thinking shift. When we do that in our organizations, when we take the people these highly skilled professionals, and we put them in a space of trust, we give them some clear guidelines to work within, but we enable them to make good decisions in the moment. We see better outcomes in our organizations. Now, most of my background has been in software development teams, and when we see this in particularly in cross-functional, self-organizing, quote-unquote, agile development teams. But we see it also in other parts of the organizations as we start to apply this. And that's the complexity theory coming into action. What's the minimum set of boundaries, the small set of rules, within which this group of highly skilled, knowledgeable professionals are able to make the best decisions, as opposed to, as a manager, I have to define everything down to the nth degree. And we see intelligent behavior emerging because of that. But as a leader, I come back to empathy. This sits on a foundation of caring about and breaking some of these causal loops, changing the causal loops. The causal loop in many organizations today is one of blame. And as a result of that, messages get filtered, and things wait too long to be addressed because it's not safe to report the bad news. If we shift, if we move from blame to curiosity, then we're able to innovate, we're able to take risks, we're able to solve problems more effectively. The first time a manager says, who can we blame in one form or another, they destroy trust, they destroy innovation in their organization. So we need to hold that space of curiosity, empathy. Yes, mistakes happen. W. Edwards Deming, 95% of an individual's performance is the system they work within, not the individual themselves. As a leader, I need to show up in the stance of what was in the system that caused this mistake, not who did it. Because I can manage the system to enable, if it is a common mistake, to prevent it from happening in the future. If it is truly an outlier, to, okay, how do we maybe find the weak signal that is going to show us that that's coming? But stepping up with that empathy, breaking the fear loop, you're guaranteed of better outcomes, more innovation, and honestly, a better workplace. But break that cycle of fear, blame, hiding is an incredibly important step. Now, we're all human. We're going to step into, for all I want to show up with curiosity, something will happen and it's going to trigger me. And I'm going to respond in an appropriate way, with that, oh no, what's happened here? Who did this? I need to have the emotional maturity to turn around and say, hey folks, I was wrong. That response was inappropriate. Can we reset? And if I'm genuine about this, and I'm trying, and my people can see that I'm trying, I'm working towards getting better, then over time, we're going to see that change. Because we're asking people to break ingrained habits. And we acknowledge that, and we need to acknowledge for ourselves and with the people around us that this is a journey. We are all growing together. So that growth mindset. And dialogic. How do we have the conversations? The recognizing the structure of interactions. One of the things now this model takes a while to practice, but it's really powerful to analyze a set of interactions. One organization where I worked at, we actually started to bring the follow, oppose, move, bystand into an interaction. So any set of interactions typically would start with somebody saying, let's do this, a move. Then somebody else in the conversation will either listen and agree, maybe follow. They might want to change that. No, what about this? Let's do that, not this. They're opposed. Others might stay in the state of bystand. This is interesting. So where do you want to go for lunch? Don't know. Let's go here. That's a move. No, what about going here? That's an oppose. I don't mind. That's a bystand. Another suggestion, a move. How about this? How about here? Yes, we all get on board with that. But analyzing the dialogue, sometimes actually doing that deliberately and exposing it. Is this a move? Is this a follow? Is this an oppose? It's particularly useful when we're seeing patterns in conversations amongst people. To actually ask them to be aware and to pause and to pull out. But even if you're sitting outside, you're not pulling it out. Seeing what the structure is, who makes the move, then you can start to.
Okay, good. You're back. Your sound went a little goofy.
Oh,
you're back though. You're good.
I'm
going.
back. No. Okay. So being aware of the state of the dialogue and making that visible. Now, David, are we taking questions on the fly or are we waiting to the end? Because I can pause any time now.
Yeah, I'm doing a pretty good combination of that. So you've got time. People are expecting to go all the way to the top of the hour. Okay. So folks have questions, they can just type them on in as well. But if there's other things you want to cover, I'll just interrupt you as questions come in, and you can stop when you have finished your side of the formal presentation, and we can take more questions.
Cool. So how do we create the space of collaboration instead of dictation? Because I see a few people have raised hands and we haven't responded to those.
Yeah, you can't raise hands. The only thing you can do is chat in. So you don't open mics in this session. So what I tell, if you have a question, you have a raised hand, you fill that question out in the chat, or they can throw it in the Q&A, which I've been monitoring both. And I know Curtis raised his hand at one point because of the sound, and he's been listening intently. So that's why I put it down because I checked in on you with the sound.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, how do we step into that space of listening and collaboration, understanding the elements of situational leadership, a stance that is appropriate to this team at this moment in time. And one of the things that great leaders are good at is telling stories and understanding that we communicate. We are a storytelling species. And I'm not going to try and teach this model now, because this is a large chunk, but it's a understanding that there are regular structures and plots there, that literally there are 7 basic plots to every story that you will have come across, every book, every movie, the stories that we have told ourselves as a species. We are a storytelling species.
Yes, we are. I completely agree with that.
And learning to be comfortable telling stories. We all have our stories. And that the story is what inspires us. So in the class, we're going to spend some time building our own story. What is the story I want to convey to the team I'm working with, to the organization? What's the inspiring thing that we want to come up with? And it brings us to, how do we lead change? How do we create that compelling vision? And stories communicate that compelling vision. And that helps us move through, and understanding that if we are going to bring culture change, that there's a whole lot of interactions here. This is work by Ahmed Sidki that looks at where do we change? How do we change? Moving the whole organization one little piece at a time. It doesn't help. One of the most common things that we see in trying to do organizational change is we drop in a new process, and that will push that part of the pyramid out. But we don't address the things like incentive models or values and beliefs of the people, or we don't change the organization structure to support the new way of working. Never mind the leadership and the strategy. So that culture sits like an elastic band. So we bring in this new way, this process, and it bounces back. And we see this oh so often in organizations adopting a new set of practices, a new framework, and yeah, they bring in some of the words, but you don't see the culture shift. You don't see the behavioral changes. But we've got the veneer. For me, one of the most common things where I see this is organizations trying to adopt an agile way of working and bringing in the practice of the daily stand-up. An interactive event where people are supposed to be working, a group of people who has work that is dependent upon each other, collaborating on how they do that work. That's the intent. But all too often, it's a status report to some manager or leader and nothing about collaboration. And understanding just how change feels.
That's a very interesting cycle there.
Where do we get to? And so many paths where we get off the track. As if we're going to lead people on a journey, we need to understand what's happening in their emotional elements. And create the environment is I cannot change somebody else. I can create an environment where they want to change. And if I'm going to be an adaptive leader, if I'm going to be an agile leader, my job is to create that environment of adaptive change. And that's probably a good place for me to stop.
That's excellent. There's a lot of stuff covered there around self-leadership and the elements of leading with agility for sure. And there's a whole lot more that can be covered in an extensive class as well. Does anybody have any questions for Shane? Any comments, thoughts? We'd love to be able to take your questions. Oh, there's got to be some good questions out there.
Yes, this content will be shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a list of books and references in your slides? Yeah, each slide had actually some really good references on them. If you notice, there's like four or five different book references.
Yeah.
I'll have to thank you, Shane. How can you lead with agility and empathy when it is not mirrored by those above you?
Understanding what your scope of control and scope of influence is, and being realistic about that.
That's such a great answer, Shane. Do it in your scope. Do
it in your scope. And so there's a scope of control that you will have, and there is a scope of influence. What you can do within your scope of control will impact and be visible in your scope of influence. And over time, that scope of influence will expand.
Where can we get information on the full Leading with Agility class? You can check our website, Ray. So I'll put the website up here, www.softed.com. We'll have public sessions coming up here shortly. And we already have organizations buying the program. And then let's see here, Shane, how do we know which classes are run by Shane? That's a little bit more difficult. What you want to think is that Shane teaches all the other instructors, so everybody is fantastic, or they wouldn't be out there teaching. Organizational change needs to be a constant thing from the beginning of the change. Awareness and desire to change impacts the associated needs of empathy. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, just absolutely. Our organizations today can't be static.
How can
the world around us?
How can the Scrum Master get a team to consistently reach 100% of sprint points? I love it.
Oh.
Not possible.
Just
it's a complex system. You got to learn the complex system. As you learn the complex system, things will happen. By the way, I'm sharing here as we're talking. Shane is part of this phenomenal conference we're going to be putting out here shortly, AI for SDLC professionals. We're rolling it out on September 24th. It's a full day event, 9 speakers, 9 sessions. 24th
or 28th?
28th, sorry, thank you, the 28th. So anyways, if you wish to register, I put the link in, I'll put the link in again. It's $95 a head. Let's get back to comments. There was a mention that change bounces back if there's no culture shift. What 3 critical elements are necessary to achieve cultural shift? Shane.
What 3 critical elements are necessary to achieve cultural
shift?
All of the research says the single most important thing is the way that the most senior leaders in the organization model the change. As it cascades down. If the senior leaders don't model the change, then nothing else almost matters. We also, then if I can share my screen.
Yeah, go for it.
So this part of the pyramid, the leadership style, values, habits has a lot of weight when we start moving it. The other place where we need to move it is at the bottom. So if we move the top and the bottom, other stuff will carry along with it. So leadership attitudes and behaviors, and then the people elements, values, beliefs. So those two are tightly interwoven, and they will be the strongest part. Then in the middle, it almost doesn't matter. Yes, they all have to align. So you can pick almost any process. Now, I'm an agilist. I would, as a general rule, want organizations to bring in cross-functional teams and reduce the hierarchies and the structural elements. In the processes, look at probably some of the agile frameworks and like Scrum or Kanban. But you're doing a small shift, one piece at a time, and it's a little piece.
All right. What advice can you offer for those who are leading from below with agility and emotional intelligence within their space? However, leadership is tone deaf. How can one effectively navigate within the space? What recommendations do you have?
I can never remember who said it. Change your organization or change your organization. We can change, we can influence. And that scope of influence, scope of control, scope of influence. But truly,
got to make the change at some point.
You've got to make a change.
Yeah,
you've got to decide. Am I gonna stay in here and move this organization with me, or am I going to choose to go somewhere else?
The problem is most folks don't have the confidence that they have the skills to make that move. So that's part of the things I talk about is building a resiliency around your self-confidence, so you have that confidence to make that change.
Martin Fowler. Thank you, Rick. Yes, it was Martin Fowler. I had his face in my head and I couldn't remember his name. But
yeah, ultimately you have to move on. You got to be confident that you can move on and not be scared of it. All right, then. Looks like we're at the top of the second hour. So you've been with us for a full hour, Mr. Shane. We thank everyone. As I typed in, you will have the slides, recordings, and PDUs sent over to you in the next couple days. If you're getting impatient, just let us know. We'll see if we can speed that up. Bonnie says, thank you for answering her question. Well then, Shane, have a great rest of your day, brother. You got a long day ahead of you. We really appreciate your time. Look forward to talking to you here in the next hour and a half. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.